right, it is 7 o'clock, so we will go ahead and get started. My name is Stephanie Smith. I'm the Director of School Counseling here in Berners Township. It is my great pleasure this evening to introduce the high school counseling team to you, our junior class parents. So with a warm welcome, we want to say thank you so much for joining us tonight, for coming out for this presentation for the junior year, and welcome to the junior year. Today, your students, the junior class, was right here. They were sitting in the seats that you are in, and they had a very similar version of this presentation by their school counselors. And so we enjoyed our time with them. They were a fantastic audience. So the counselors do this presentation several times for each grade level every year, and your kids were great listeners this morning, really took in the information and had great questions. So our advice to you is to go home and talk about it if you haven't already. Have conversations about what they heard, what they remember about the presentation today, what stood out to them, and what questions they have moving forward. So this is really what we consider the kickoff of the junior year. There are several connections that they will have with their school counselors from here. They will have an individual conference in the spring. They will have Part A and Part B of the senior packet in preparation for next year. So this is really the kickoff, so please go and have a conversation with your student and enjoy tonight as you form your own questions and take in the information as well. That being said, I do want to give a kudos to the team. They have worked so hard, as they always do, on these presentations, and I am so proud of them and to work alongside them every day. They really pour their hearts and souls into this. They really bring the best that there is out there to the top of your screen. And you are in such great hands with them, and I tell parents all the time when I get questions that when you have one of them, you have all of them. They work as a team. They are a cohort, and the best that's out there in college admissions, you have it right here. So thank you to the team for all of your work preparing the class of 2027 for what comes after Ridge High School. I also want to give a shout out tonight, making tonight possible, Mr. Barry, for getting our pack set up for us and for setting us up for success. Thank you. He even had Taylor Swift playing for us. He knows the department. We want to thank Dr. Lazovic and Mrs. Howarth, our grade level AP, for being here to support and for all their support every day to your students here at Ridge High School. So logistics for tonight. Tonight's presentation is essentially in two parts. We have a slide deck for you where you will get information, sit back, relax. I will make sure that the slides themselves, all of the links, are posted on the website and in your inbox tomorrow. I will also make sure that within the next couple business days that the recording of this entire evening is also in your inbox and on our website as well. So that way you can refer back to this as many times as you need and you don't have to worry about taking any notes or pictures tonight. After the counselors run through the slide deck of information, they will then do a Naviance demo for you featuring Miss Wu, our Naviance pro. Everybody's a pro on the team, but Miss Naviance, I just called her Miss Naviance. She might love that. Miss Wu, who is Miss Naviance, she will do a demo for you, showing you all of the features of Naviance. So your students saw a part of that today, and so we know that it's a powerful platform for you as parents, and for those of you who are new to Naviance, we will take you through a general orientation so that you know how to poke around yourselves once you get home. After that, we will open it up to Q&A. So this is your opportunity to ask the counseling team questions that you have, and we are here to answer. My ask of you is that you keep your questions to, in a general sense, right? Things that will benefit the entirety of the group here. If you have any really specific questions for you and your family, of course, you can contact your child's school counselor individually. All right? So with no further ado, thank you again for coming. We are so happy that you're here, and we will get it started with Mrs. Kukura.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for being here. Okay, we're going to first start off with just talking about what this year is, junior year. When we had your students in with us today, we let them know that this is kind of the kickoff, as Ms. Smith said, to thinking about post-secondary planning. And we define that term for students as just the plan for after high school, for when they leave here. And we validated for them that this year, may bring up a lot of feelings for students as they begin to kind of think about these things. It might be the first time they're thinking about these things. They might be getting a lot of questions that they may or may not have the answers to yet. So we said to them that a range of feelings at this point is really very normal, from nervous to excited, and then we reassured them that we are here to help them throughout this process, and that every student's journey is going to look a little bit different this year. One thing we said to them was, we know that students sometimes hear that junior year is the most important year, and we stress that, all the years of high school are important. This year is kind of the last year to make a good impression, put their best foot forward, and that this year is really just a year of discovery and researching and kind of just gathering information, and that no real decisions need to be made. Okay, the goals for this meeting. We want to talk about what our role is as counselors in this process with your children. I'm going to introduce you to our planning website. We're going to present our patented 10-step process for junior year. As you may remember from last year in the sophomore parent evening, we kind of have 10 steps for every year to make things easier for you to digest and to know that throughout the course of the year, what are the things that you should be knowing about, paying attention to, and just giving some time to. So this junior year, there are 10 steps of things to just be aware of and a timeline to follow. And then what we told the students was, our hope was that they left that meeting feeling more confident about what it is that they needed to do this year. So we did say to them, at this point, if they have really not given this much thought right now, that is okay. But at this point in November and moving forward through the rest of this year, that it's a good time to start thinking about some things, and then we gave like an outline on how to do that. Okay, so the counselor role, this is very important. We are here to help and we are here to support. We told your children today that, as I just mentioned, that this journey is going to look different for everybody, and that is great. It is different. They are all individuals, and we are here for them for questions, or if they need to vent, or if they have anything that's going on with them. We are here to walk them through this process. We're here to answer any questions that you might have. We are a very valuable resource. As Ms. Smith said, when you have one of us, you have all of us, because we do act as a team. We do consult each other. We do share information. We love to do that. So it really is a collaborative team and a process, and definitely here to help you and your child. Okay, let me take you through the counseling website. So we told the students today, when they get onto this website, to bookmark this page, because this is a website that is rich with resources. And it's something that you'll refer to at different times, because there are a lot of really good links on here with different information. And we told the students, if they have a question, it's probably answered here, or at least the beginning steps of it. As you can see in the black on the side here, there's a couple different links. The high school academic planning part of the website is where they will go when they start scheduling. So information about courses and the things that we run, and the course selection sheet is there. We're not focusing on that tonight, but just so that you are aware that it is there. But what we are going to do is click on the college and career planning tab. So in the black on the side, there are a bunch of different links. The one thing that I'm going to point out and click on is the 11th grade planning. And I mentioned that we had the step process, and we have that. And we're going to go through every one of these steps, so I'm not going to talk about them right now, but you can refer back to this. And what we do is we give like time frames that are suggested for different things at different times. This is not like mandatory, you have to do things in this order. It's just a suggested time frame to give you like an outlook of what we would recommend, or what we would think is best. But if you can deviate that if you need to. Also along the side here, some of this does apply for seniors, so you'll come back to this like next year when you're doing the application process. But there's information about college visits and workshops. We just had the annual college fair. We're having that again next year. There are reps that come visit to Ridge High School, so the information is posted there. We also have Ms. Smith mentioned that she's going to be posting our presentation. That is under the events and presentations part of our website. So if you wanted to go and look at the sites, or look forward to like last year's senior presentation, if you're someone that wants to look ahead and see like what's next, you can look at last year's presentation as well. So we do post everything there. We also have other information about essay writing. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. Also, when it comes time, if their students are doing a resume, an interview, there's information about standardized testing that we're going to talk about. Okay, so really what I like about this is it's so user-friendly. You can just literally go through each one of the links on the side. It's very simple. There's not a ton of graphics like flashing in your face. And it's pretty simple to look at, but it does have a lot of information just to make you feel more informed, and it's all in one place. Okay. Okay, so post-secondary pathways, like I mentioned, post-secondary is the plan for after high school. So what we said to the students today was the presentation that we do with them today and what we're doing with you tonight is very heavily focused on the college process. But we do absolutely understand that there's students who have different paths, and that is fine, and we listed some of them up here. So college could mean a 2-year school, a 4-year school. We could be talking about employment, the military, they could get a job, do a gap year. So we do have resources available for students who are on those paths. And we'll work with them individually if those are their paths as well. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the components of the application process to start out. Okay, so just so you are aware of the different things that go into a review. So in the center is the application, and then the arrows to the sides are things that are going to be part of the application process. Certainly the student will submit the application, and then what else are the admissions officers looking at? So I'm going to start with the transcript and the GPA. So I'm going to show a picture of the transcript in the next slide, but that's just a record of what the student has done from 9th grade moving forward. And when I said before that, students often hear junior year is the most important year, what a college admissions officer does is they're going to look at 9th, 10th, and 11th grade courses. So when we said to them, this is your last year to kind of put your best foot forward, that's what we meant, because they're going to be applying to college early in their senior year where they will not yet have grades. The courses that they are currently enrolled in as a senior will be listed on the transcript, but no grades because, as we know, the transcript only has the final grades. So they spend the most amount of time looking at the transcript, the courses the student took, the trends, the grade point average each year, the grade point average over the 3 years that they are here. That's all listed on the transcript. That's a big part of the application process. Okay, moving up to standardized tests. I'm just going to mention that as part of it, and I'm going to talk more about that a little bit later on. That's the SAT or the ACT. The school profile data, I did want to click on this. We did show your students this today. This is a document. It is a 6-page document that you definitely can access after tonight. It's information about Ridge High School and the school community, the types of courses that we have, the number of APs, what are our average test scores, how many students do this and that, where students have attended in the past. So it gives an admissions officer an idea of what kind of high school this is. And this is sent to every school to which your student applies, along with their transcript and some other information. So just so you know, they're evaluating your student as a Ridge High School student, and how do they know what that type of school is? They read this profile information. Okay, then we'll move down to the personal essay. At this point, all you need to know about the personal essay is that it is part of the application process. So students will write an essay that is going to be part of the application. We told the students today at this point just to be aware that it is part of the process. They actually can Google the prompts on the Common Application, which is an application used for very many schools, and just read what they are. They don't have to write anything this year, they don't have to do anything this year, but they should just be aware maybe of what those questions are, and that if sometimes maybe on an off, a conversation you're having with them, like, oh my gosh, that might be a really good essay topic. So we just told them, just look at the prompts and see what they are, and that is an essay that goes to every school to which they apply. This is an opportunity for a student to have a college hear their voice. I mean, think about it. They get their transcript, which is letters and numbers and grades. They get scores, that's numbers. This is really a time where a student can stand out and they can hear their voice and get to know them a little bit better. There's a lot of support here in the high school with the essay process, not only through us, we do read them and offer support, but the English teachers have it as an assignment. So they do work on that in the classroom setting, so there is a lot of support with that. It does cause students a lot of stress with the essay in terms of like, what should I write about and that type of thing. And on our website, I don't know if you remember in the black on the side, essay prompts was one of those things. So you can go and just read through like how to get started, ideas, and things like that. The bottom is letters of recommendation. So again, what do you need to know right now tonight? Nothing to do in this moment, but just that we said in moving into the springtime, students should be thinking about who they would like to write their letter of recommendation when it comes to teacher. They should be asking a teacher that they feel can represent them the best, not necessarily the teacher that they have the highest grade in or the highest level class that they have. It's the teacher who best knows them as a student and can comment on what does that student look like in the classroom. Okay, so depending on the college, 1 or 2 teacher letters of recommendation is appropriate, and then in addition, the counselors write a letter for every student. So those letters will go, and they are considered as part of the application. Special skills and talents / other are things like if you're an athlete, if you're a writer, if you have a portfolio because you're an artist, if you're a legacy, geographic diversity with certain schools, so just different factors that make a student stand out that are outside the application or anything a student is submitting. Okay. All right, so step 1 is really right about the transcript, and we talked about what that was. I know it's very small, but that is a sample of what we would be sending, and that's what it would look like. The only difference is in that blank spot in the lower right-hand corner, it would be the courses that are in progress for senior year. So they do see what the student is signed up for, they just won't see the final grades on here until the end of that senior year. So we asked students today to just think about in terms of planning for next year's courses, the type of classes that they want to take, the rigor of the curriculum, the trends that they want to have, and just think about like how they want to be reflected in their last year of high school. What's also listed on here, and I know it's super tiny, is there's a GPA for each year that they're in high school. So they have a 9th, a 10th, and an 11th grade GPA. And then the cumulative weighted GPA is an average of those 3. And that is what the college is going to be seeing, an average of freshman, sophomore, and junior year GPA. And that's the cumulative weighted GPA. Okay, step 2 is the standardized testing plan. So I mentioned that as part of the application process. So PSAT results, if your student took that, were just released so they can review those test results. And then they want to consider what their standardized testing plan should be. Okay, so again, I'm kind of big on like what you need to know right now, right? Because this is a big, long year and there's a lot to do. So what you need to know right now is that potentially your student may be submitting SAT or ACT scores, okay, as part of the application process. So when you're going to schools and visiting or gathering information, you're going to want to find out if that school wants standardized test scores. Okay, so some schools, I'm going to jump down a little bit. Some schools are test optional, meaning that they don't require students to submit SAT or ACT scores, and they will not hold that against you. Some schools are SAT optional with like a caveat of you have to have a certain GPA. So we really stress to the students today, and we want to stress to you too, is just pay attention to what the particular college is asking for. A term that we often say a lot in our department is it depends on the college. We should get sweatshirts. It depends on the college because everybody does something a little bit different. So what you're trying to do as your information gathering, right, because that's the goal for this year, without making any real decisions, is to find out what the policies are of the particular school. Do they want test scores? I said to the students today, some of my students have said, I don't really do well on tests, and I'm not going to apply to schools that ask for test results. So if I know all of my schools are truly test optional, I might not need to take them. So that's kind of the plan that I'm talking about moving forward. There is something called test blind, schools that even if you were to submit the scores, they won't look at them. They're blind, they don't see them. They don't want them as part of the application process. So again, that's information that you'd be finding out from the particular school. When you sign up or register to take those tests, you're going to be going to the SAT or ACT website to do that specifically. The SAT is under the College Board, which was also for the PSAT, and the ACT is under the ACT website. So either of those websites is how you will register to take one of those tests. We do get a lot of questions about test prep, and on our website we do have some examples of test prep companies. We don't endorse one over the other. We just kind of give a list of ones that students have utilized in the past and been successful with. We told the students today, you do not have to test prep, but if you want to, the resources are there on our website. Super scoring, just so you know what that term means, it means that if you take, let's take the SAT because it's listed there first. If you took the SAT 2 times, and on one of the sittings you did better in the math section, and on the second test you did better in the reading section, that college would then take the highest of both of those 2 tests and to a super score to your advantage. So sometimes we like to say, like, if you want to take just the SAT, take it more than 1 time, because if you do better on one section than the other, they'll super score it to the highest. The TOEFL and the Duolingo, that's for students who have gone to school internationally at some point in their high school career. If that applies to your child, we can talk about that individually with them. It may be additional information that the college is asking for. Okay. Oh, I also said to the students today, at this point, need to know, I said go to, like decide which test you're gonna do, go to the websites, SAT and ACT, and look at when the tests are offered. And the reason I said that was they're all super busy and they have a million things going on, and they might know that, okay, oh my gosh, I'm glad I looked at this because I can't test in April or February because that one test date conflicts with a family function that we have, or I have a tournament. So I just said look forward and ahead to some of the dates so you can get a plan for when they're taking it. Most juniors are taking these tests at some point in time in the spring, some over the summer, and there's even some offerings for students to take it in their senior year in the fall. Or some students have already done it. But there's lots of opportunities still. If they haven't done it or haven't thought about it yet, there's plenty of opportunities to take it moving forward before senior year hits and before we actually have to send those test results off. Okay, so how do I decide which test to take, right? SAT, ACT, which one? So what we told students is there really is no harm in taking both. There's no predictor of which test is better than the other. There are some things out there which will say, well, we can tell you which one's suited for you. Our philosophy really is to just take both, see which one you do better on, and then focus on that one. However, whatever works for your student is fine with us. So I have students who say, I'm only taking the ACT or I'm only taking the SAT. That's okay. There's no requirement. It really is a personal decision, and we can talk to them about that personally if you like. But we just generally recommend take one of each and see how you do. Okay, and then also, if you take both and you don't like the test results from one, you just never submit them, and it's like it never happened. So it really doesn't, there's no harm to taking both if you're not submitting those scores. Some colleges actually, though, will super score among tests, so they'll take the highest ACT in one section and the highest SAT. That's not super common, but some do it. So just an FYI on that. Okay, as I mentioned, the standardized tests for ACT and SAT, they're both digital, so computerized at Ridge High School. And then the links, just important to know that the different websites have the links there, and they'll register through those particular websites. Okay, I'm going to hand it off to Ms. Hughes, who's going to talk to you about programming.
Thank you. So step 3 that we reviewed with students was about our departmental programming. And so the website that Ms. Kukuro had showed earlier, we do have our calendar of events posted on there if you ever wanted to take a look. So you're here at the junior parent night right now. But there is information on our website about college visits, career rep visits, which is something a little bit newer that we're doing, where we have reps from different careers come in and talk to our students, college fair, financial aid night, all of that, and those occur every year. So it'll be really important to check that, this spring and next year if you're looking to attend any of those events with your senior next year as well. And something we mentioned to students is the Ridge High School college visits. These have pretty much tapered off for this year, but we run them every year, and we have, I want to say, 60 colleges typically that come here during the fall and host small college visits with our students. So all of those are in the media center. It's with a rep from a specific college who usually gives a little presentation and then has students maybe ask questions or can talk to them a little bit more specifically about their application. So if a student is interested in a particular school, and they're going to be here, it's really great for them to sign up for these. They are like excused from class if they have a class period during that time, and they'll head to the media center to meet with that rep. And what's great is a lot of times the rep that's hosting the visit is also the application reader. Not every time, but a lot of the time it's the application reader for our school. And so they can build that connection or ask questions that they might otherwise, email or something later on. Okay. So step number 4 is Naviance, and Ms. Wu is going to give us a demonstration on that later, but this is a computer program that your students and even yourselves are going to probably become pretty familiar with over the next year or so. And Naviance is a great place that students can do college research. There are a lot of tools that they can use to find schools that might fit their needs or might be appropriate for them. It gives them really specific information about admissions, but for students from Ridge High School, so it's very specific. And it's also somewhere where students are going to actually submit and request parts of their application senior year, so it's really important for them to get familiar with Naviance. And they had received their logins in sophomore year, but I just gave this information, we gave it during the presentation. If your student ever forgets their password or they're not able to get in, we're able to reset their password from our end, so just encourage them to reach out if they're not able to get into Naviance. And we can always assist in setting up a parent account as well, so that's something that we're able to do also. Okay. So we talked to students a little bit, and Naviance is a great tool, but we kind of reinforced the idea that this year, junior year, is really not about coming up with a comprehensive list of schools that they want to apply to. It's more so about figuring out what their preferences are, what are the factors that they're looking for in a college, and what places might fit those needs, rather than actually coming out of junior year and saying, I have a list, I know where I'm applying, and all of that. We're not looking for that. But we want them to start thinking about what might be a good match for them based on the qualities that colleges have. So we were talking to them about encouraging some reflection, what are their interests, what are they good at, what are their ultimate goals for the future, and then academically, where are they at? So what schools might be a good fit for them based on that. And weighing those options with other factors that students find important, like where it is, how far away from home they are, how large the school is. So we just encourage them to start thinking of those factors and sort of evaluating all of the options that are out there that sort of fit these qualities that they might be interested in. So the next few slides are a couple of sets of vocab words that you're probably going to hear a lot over the next year or so. And we just want you and your students to be familiar with what they mean. So, you know, this is in regards to a student's college list. You'll often hear us refer to things as safety, target, or reach schools. And so a safety school would be where a student is much above the profile academically that this school is looking for. So maybe they have a higher GPA or higher test scores or both, and it feels pretty safe that this student would be admitted to that school. And when we talk about a target school, we're talking about a school where the student is right at what that college is looking for academically. So they're right on target with their SAT scores, ACT scores, GPA, all of that is sort of right in the realm of what that school is looking for. And then lastly, we talk about reach schools a lot. So reach schools would be schools whose academic profile is above the student's academic profile. But an important note that we made to our students as well is we do consider any school that has a lower than a 30% acceptance rate as a reach school in general, right? Just because there are several schools out there that, accept 10 or 5% of students that apply there. And so regardless of like how amazing, and our students are amazing, but their stats are, that's a really low percentage. And so we would always kind of lean towards calling that a reach school because it's just very, very difficult to get into some of these schools. So we would rank anything also with less than a 30% acceptance rate as a reach. Okay. So some other commonly used admissions terms, early decision and early action. A lot of our students will just say applying early, and there's really two different policies that cover that early deadline. So it's important that you guys and they know the difference. So early action is just a student is applying early and they're getting their decision sooner. So they would be applying usually around November 1st, they're getting their materials in, and that's kind of it. They just get everything done sooner. But early decision is similar to that, except the student is signing a binding agreement and the parent is signing a binding agreement that that student will attend that school if they're accepted to it. And so ED really should be reserved for some situation where a student is very, very interested and really loves one particular school. And if they offer that, certainly the student could ED if that's appropriate. But since it is a binding agreement, it's often a family conversation, it's often a conversation with the student's counselor, just to make sure that an ED would be the appropriate choice. Restrictive early action is not something that's super popular, but it is offered by a few schools. And what that is typically if you apply restricted early action somewhere, that school has restrictions on other places that you're allowed to apply. So if you apply to this school, you can't apply to other private schools or other certain types of schools during the same time frame, and they have regulations on that. And then lastly, we would have, regular decision, I guess, is like the regular deadline. That's what a lot of students will call it. That's typically a little bit later of a deadline, so around January-ish time. And students will often get their decisions for that in February or March. So it's a little bit later on, which is why sometimes students gravitate towards that early action deadline. And then rolling, same thing, not as common, but rolling just means that as soon as the student submits the application, that college will start reviewing the application. With all of the other deadlines I mentioned, they could submit their application a couple weeks early, and the college doesn't review them until that deadline passes. So they allow students to keep submitting things until that deadline, and then they start reading them. With rolling, as soon as they get the application, they'll start reading it that day, and so we find that students tend to get decisions a little bit quicker, depending on how busy the season is with rolling applications. In terms of types of applications, we really mostly hear about the Common App these days. Most colleges are using that right now, and even the colleges that haven't typically used it in the past are switching over to use the Common App. So you would be hard pressed to find more than a few schools that aren't going to be using it. So most students will have an account on there. But college specific, from time to time we will see colleges that have their own application on their website. It typically consists of a lot of the same information, but sometimes schools have a specific application form that they prefer students to fill out. Something we wanted to make sure students were aware about is also the types of admissions decisions. So of course we've all heard of accepted, denied. Those are very straightforward, but deferred and waitlisted are ones that I think kind of get a little bit confusing sometimes. And so if a college was to defer a student, that typically means that they want to review the student's application again. And so they are just kind of holding off on giving a decision and saying, we're going to take another look through this and we'll get back to you in the future, but we don't have a decision right now. Versus if a student is waitlisted, that typically means that they, based on the application, they would like to offer the student admission, but they just don't have any space at the time. And so they will offer a student a wait list sometimes and wait to see if other students commit to the school and how things shake out, and then they can offer that student a place in their freshman pool if they have enough students who don't join. So wait list is kind of like, we do want you to come here, but we need a little bit more time to figure out what other students are going to be coming here too. And then financial aid and scholarships, you'll hear FAFSA a lot. The FAFSA is the federal financial aid form. The CSS profile is similar, but is typically used for smaller and private colleges, but both of them are a way of figuring out how can colleges offer financial aid to students and families. And then we hear a lot about merit scholarships, so that would be based on the student's academic profile, and they're typically considered for those when they actually submit their application and are reviewed for admission. But from time to time, we do see colleges or even local organizations offering scholarships to our students as well that they could apply to later. So I know Ms. Kugro talked about this a little bit earlier. We really stress to our students that junior conferences are much different than what they're used to in terms of scheduling. So previously, when we met with students for scheduling, we would have a short meeting to discuss their course choices and their teacher recommendations and all of that, and that was kind of it. We submitted them, we move on. But the junior year meeting is really meant to be a lot more than that, so we block out a lot more time for our juniors per meeting so that we can talk about their senior year courses, get all of those set up in Genesis, and then also talk to them about their plans for after high school. So we really make it a point in our junior conference to sort of touch on what their plan might be. Are there ways we can help them? Are there colleges that we can recommend to them? What do they think they might want to study? And sort of get into that a little bit deeper, so that way they go into the spring and summer having had that conversation and foundation, in regards to post-secondary planning. So we will be discussing all of that during the junior conference. We will reach out to all of our students with dates and times for that, but it's going to be a one-on-one, more lengthy meeting for our students this year. And then I know Ms. Cougar talked a little bit about letters of recommendation as well. I just want to echo what she said. Students do not have to do anything in regards to letters of recommendation right now. It's just something that we want sort of in the back of their mind, thinking about what teachers they have a good relationship with, who might know them really well, that sort of thing. And I know Ms. Kukuro mentioned it, but I'll say it again. The teacher that students use for letters of rec does not have to be a class that they got an A++ in, or someone where they're like, I did so well in this class. It really needs to be someone who knows them and can speak to them as their character and as a student. So the grade is not as important when it comes to thinking of who the teachers they feel best about are. It's more that relationship that they have that I would say to focus on. We do recommend typically asking 2 teachers. It's just some schools may only permit students to have 1, but it's best to have 2 just sort of in your back pocket, because the majority of schools will ask for 2 letters of rec. And we sort of advise students to start thinking about who they want to ask, and then actually do the asking, in the spring of this year. So I would say any time from that junior conference on would be appropriate. We just want to give teachers, the most amount of time that they can to work on that letter. So any time in junior year, spring to the end of junior year would be appropriate. And we gave students a heads up as well. Sometimes teachers do have certain forms or questionnaires that they want the student to do so that they can get a little bit more information about them, outside of the school. And so sometimes teachers will ask students to do a couple of extra things if they want to write for them as well. Okay. So we're getting to the spring. When we talk to students, we're like, we know this feels so far away. It feels far away for us too, but it'll come up really quickly. And something that we are really lucky about here in this geographic area is that there are a lot of colleges that are really local to us that students, have easy access to. And so what we talk to them about is this idea of like starting to think about the qualities that they like in a college, and doing that by, taking some campus tours or visiting some campuses. We realize that a lot of our students like to, apply to schools that are maybe farther away or not super accessible. So if they're able to take a quick trip to somewhere that is local, just to figure out, do I like a big school? Do I like a school that's somewhat close to home? Are there things about the campus that I don't like? That can be really valuable. Of course, by all means, if you want to fly somewhere and take college visits or do anything like that, that's amazing. But we're really lucky, too, that they can stop by some pretty great schools locally and just check those out, too. So I think the idea would be just sort of getting their feet wet in terms of like seeing what a college campus looks like and what they're interested in. For those schools that are really far away or not necessarily accessible, there is a link on here for UVisit, which has a lot of virtual visits for colleges that might not be local to here. So sometimes they'll do like a virtual tour or info session where students can actually see around the campus of schools that aren't local to us. And next, I'm going to pass it to Ms. Wu to talk about sort of finishing out junior year and the last steps of that.
All right, so hopefully you guys are still here with me in June. I know we've fast forwarded all the way to the end of the year, and it's only November, and it feels, like 30 degrees out. So let's pretend we're in June. And we have met with your students for their junior conference. We will have gone over this as well in terms of what's up for the rest of the year. So the senior packet is something that we do ask students to do at the end of the school year. It's due in June before we leave for the summer. and it's posted in Google Classroom, so I'm just gonna go over it briefly. I know we've given you guys a ton of information, so just remember that all of this will be accessible for you guys to look at again. But the senior packet is a tool that we kind of utilize to see where the students are at the end of the year, and then also that letter of recommendation that comes from counselors. We will look at the information that students and parents share to help us write that letter of recommendation for each student. So there is a self-description survey where students will take the time to reflect on themselves, their interests, things that they're looking forward to. This is something that I think is a great tool when students are thinking about their personal college essay that they're writing, to just help them reflect on things that they think are important about themselves to share with other people. So hopefully it's something that can kind of help them when they are also thinking about the college essay. There's a parent brag sheet. It's much shorter for you guys. There's only, I think, 5 questions. So you guys have the chance to talk about your son or daughter and just share all the great things about them, everything that you think is important that we may not know, and maybe we do know, but you also want to just make sure that we're sharing that information through that recommendation. And then we do have a preliminary college list, so really just kind of basic, giving us an idea of what they're looking at, and then the resume to show us what students have been doing throughout high school. And getting organized is what kind of takes us into the summer, so really starting to look at what schools they think they will be applying to, and starting to figure out, when those deadlines are to organize themselves, to start looking at the application and looking at what else they need as part of that application. So Common App is something that is available to students to create an account on at this point, but it doesn't roll over to their application year until August. So they can start to look at it and get a general idea of what they need to fill out on it, but I wouldn't actually begin completing it until August 1st, just because some of the school-specific questions may change. They can also look at the essay prompts. Those will typically be posted by Common App in the spring, so that they can start to think about which question they might want to work on. They'll continue their college visits and just editing senior packet part A if they need to. Start thinking about financial aid as well, because some of those deadlines are a little bit earlier if you are applying early decision or early action, so that's something to keep in mind as well. And then we have senior packet part B, which will be due when we are back in school in September. So this is something where they have to have this done for us to start working on the college applications in September. We do have what we call a final list, but that is a list that can change, so even though we say final, it's not actually final. Nobody's signing off on that. They can make edits to that. And then there's a transcript release form, and they can update their resume if they need to. So that is this year in a nutshell. We have this planning calendar, so you guys can kind of see what are some of the things to be doing in certain parts of the year. So if you guys need to reference this, it will be posted on our website. And again, it is something that, just so everybody remembers, we kind of throw all this information out at you guys this early just because everybody is in a different place, so we want to make sure that people do have access to it if they are at this point, but also know where to find it when they get to this point too. I will come back to this form, and then I'm going to go to Naviance. So this is kind of the fun part. As everybody knows, my name is Ms. Naviance. So this is just a demo. Hopefully you guys have maybe at least heard of Naviance. If you haven't, this is something, like we mentioned, students do have access to. If they were here sophomore year, they should be able to log in. If they've forgotten their login, they can see their counselor or see one of the secretaries to be able to get logged back into it. So this is just one of many tools that students can use to begin their college research. It is something that we do utilize in senior year for when they are actually submitting applications as well. So this is our example student, Sarah Student's homepage. And just to kind of show you what it is and how to use it, If you are looking at just general information, you'll find that when you click on her little name logo up here. And then there is academic information, so you see her cumulative GPA. If you go to About Me and click on Test Scores, this is where students will have their SAT, ACT, or PSAT scores loaded if they had it reported to us, which generally most students do, but if it doesn't show up for some reason, they can always print out a copy of the score report and give it to us, and we can upload that information. This is information that is only seen by us, so it's not something that's shared with schools. But this is, again, another research tool for students to be able to start to gauge where they are with their college search and how that academic fit is. So that's where the test scores and the SAT will come in, and I'll kind of show that in a little bit as well. So just so you're aware of like what students have been doing on here, we had them last year fill out the career interest profiler, which is under self-discovery. There's also some other interest inventories that students can take on here, and then there's a careers tab on here as well. So tied to that career interest profiler, students were able to see different careers that somebody with their personality profile were, connected to. And as they researched those careers, they could kind of see like what majors people had to go to college for to get into that field, what level of education they needed, and then that can also kind of help them find schools to look at. So that's something that they can do through those tabs. The main tab that a lot of students will be using this year and next year will be the colleges tab. So I'm just going to point out a couple things on here. If you ask your son or daughter later, hopefully they can log in and you guys can kind of play around with it. On here, one thing that I'm going to point out is we talked about scholarships. So we do have the scholarship search here. This is actually not just scholarships, just so you're aware. We did point this out to students today as well, but there are different programs that we post through this link as well. So GovSchool, that is something that juniors sometimes apply to. That posting will be found here, but also, we'll post that in the announcements that students get each day. So this is a place where students can go and look up programs or scholarships all the way through to their senior year. It's always changing because as deadlines pass, those scholarships come off and then we add new ones, as we get that information. So they can always check there for scholarship info. Under colleges I'm applying to, this is where eventually they'll put their letters of recommendations from their teachers at school. But the main thing right now that I'm gonna go through in a little bit more detail is under researching colleges and find your fit. I'm gonna kind of jump around on here, but this is where students can really do research and find information about schools that is specific to Ridge High School especially. That's kind of where it's helpful. Again, it's just one tool, but when we look at the academic piece, it allows students to see where they fall academically with students who have a GPA calculated the same way as them, because every school in the US calculates GPAs differently, so this kind of just shows them something that's calculated how theirs is. So what I'm gonna do here is we showed students today that they can do an advanced college search. This is where they can put in some of those qualifiers that we talked about for when they are thinking about what they want in a school. If they are looking at just city schools, they can check that off. There's also location, so if they want to look in certain parts of the US or certain states. There is some international information as well, like Canada mostly, but if we just check off New England here, that'll kind of narrow down our college matches that show up. But students can also check off information about the number of students enrolled in a school. They can also look at if a school has a certain level of sports or certain sports too. Something to think about here is that you may not want to put in too many things because that might, limit the schools that end up coming out at the end of the search. Majors is also something that they can search by as well to kind of come up with a list of schools that might have, their specific major they're interested in. So I just checked off a couple, and then I'm going to click on View Matches. Just entering, I accidentally checked off Hawaii. I'd love to go there right now. So there's 87 matches here. So city schools in New England and Hawaii, kind of very different there, but My niece actually is from Hawaii, and she's in Nebraska right now for college, so it's possible to have that different area. So if you guys look here, it gives you a whole list of schools that you can look at. Through colleges, you can do specific college lookups as well. So if you just click on college lookup and you have a specific school you want to see information on, you can do that. I'm just going to go click on Boston University here just to show you what information is on this profile. So when you click on this, it will show you some general information, where the school is located, what type of school it is, what the setting is, and then also over here, I know everything's probably pretty small, but it'll show you the size of the school, so large, small, things like that. And then as you scroll down, it will also show you acceptance rate. So BU has an 11% acceptance rate. And then over here, if you click on these links, it will jump to that section on the page. So I'm just going to point out a couple things on here. Mostly the Ridge-specific information. There is some general information here as well, but typically what I would say is definitely go on the school's website to get a lot of the school-specific information, like their deadlines and things like that, just to make sure it's the most up-to-date. But if we click on admissions, it will give you some information about students from Ridge High School that have applied and been accepted and gone to the school, so you can kind of see that information on here in bar graph and this little chart over here. And then if you scroll down, there is a scattergram, which I think is really nice because it gives you a visual of all the GPA and test score information. So the red X's are students who applied and were denied. There are some green check marks, which are students who were accepted. And then I think it's really hard for you guys to see, but there are some diamond shapes here. Those are students who were waitlisted or deferred. And then if it's green, it means they were accepted later. If it's red, they were denied. Some students just remained on the wait list, so it just stays blue. And then this little blue circle here is where your child would be marked. Right now, most students won't be shown on the scattergram just because they don't have test scores. If they have PSAT scores, they may be plotted on here, but if they don't have any scores, they're probably not going to see that there. So they'll really kind of just be able to gauge GPA-wise, like where they fall at this point, but as we move into the spring, they'll get more information to be able to gauge where they are on here. So just to give you a visual of some of the terms that we talked about with safety, reach, and target schools, I'm going to go to Sarah Students College List and just show you some of the graphs on here. So James Madison, if we go to her admissions information and look at the graph, you'll see that she is surrounded by a lot of green acceptances. If we look at the percent of students that were accepted, it's 72%, so that's, you know, really good and probably a really solid target, almost kind of leaning into the safety range for her. So you can look at that information. If your child goes to a school and really loves a lot about it, if we keep scrolling down, there's a section that shows related colleges, so you can actually see schools that were really popular for students that also applied to JMU. So those are called the application overlaps, and then this can also help expand that list. So sometimes it's similar in the feel of the school, so you know, all the large schools. Sometimes it might be specific majors and things like that, so that's just another way to expand your list. And then we're just gonna go back and show you a couple other graphs. If we go and look at Michigan, this would be a reach school. So if we look at the graph, you can see that her admission stats are, you know, kind of below these little intersecting lines, just so you know, is where the average GPA and test scores meet. But this gives you a visual of like where she falls. So something to keep in mind here too is like a student may be around a lot of green, some green, but the percent of students accepted is 5, 7, 10%. That's really low. I know we mentioned under 30 is kind of, you know, a low acceptance rate. So that acceptance rate is something to also keep in mind as you're looking at these graphs and where they fall. But I think the graphs are a good visual just because if you look at a school and their GPA average is a 3.9, but you have a 3.5, you might think that's a really, high GPA. But if you look at the spread from the scattergram, then you can kind of see like where you might actually fall. So it's helpful to have that visual. Again, this is just one resource to do some research on. There's a lot of other, websites and places that you can get information. If you look at schools on their websites, they will post information. And then there's a lot of, info on College Board. There's the Common Data Set, which you might hear. So definitely use, all the resources that are out there to kind of gather information and start to gauge where your son or daughter is looking at schools and where they fit. So that's Naviance in a nutshell. I'm going to turn it over now to Ms. Merview and Ms. Cahill, who will be doing some Q&A. So if you guys have questions, feel free to just raise your hand and we will get the mic to you. We have one question over here. Hello. That's one. All right.
So the data for that Naviance graph that you saw, was that just last year from Ridge, or is that last 5 years, or what is that?
I think it shows the dates on it. I think we changed it, and it's probably about the last 5 years. I think we just changed it, but if you go on there, it should show you the dates that are on there.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that's important to know, because data over the years have changed a lot.
For the letters of recommendation, is it best to have like the core subject letters, like from your English and math teacher, if your child is thinking about going into like a specific career or maybe is taking a class, half a semester class, not a full year class, and that's maybe in their career path, would that be a good teacher to go to for letter of recommendation, or should they stick with like the English, math, science, history teachers?
That's a great question. There are some schools that will ask you or ask the student to submit like a STEM and then or an English and history. But it's so dependent on the student and the relationship they have with the teacher. I always say, and I forget, Ms. Hughes said it too, it could be the class where the student just has a really great relationship with the teacher, and the teacher knows that student beyond just the coursework, and can really personally talk about their character and how they're doing. It could be a teacher where that student has really improved over the course of a year, and they can talk about that. So it depends. But there are some schools that will ask you specifically just for the STEM, and then also for an English and history, and we can kind of talk about that individually. MIT, right? That's the school that asked for it. Yeah.
Hi. On the Naviance screen, do we need to share the login credentials with your student, or will the parents get a separate login?
Can you repeat your question? I'm sorry, it was hard to hear you.
So for the Naviance website, do we need to have a separate login credentials for the parents, or we need to share that with the student?
Yeah, so Naviance, there is a parent login and there is a student login. And so when parents are logging in, you should really be using the parent login. The students should be using their own login. If you are not sure what your login information is for Naviance, you are welcome to reach out to the counseling department secretaries. They can help you to set up your account. The other thing to be aware of is if you have children who graduated previously or are older, like maybe you have a senior but you also have a junior, we can link the account. So in other words, that way you can log into what you used to log into, and you'll be able to see multiple of your children, and then just click on the child and be able to look at their particular schools that they may have added. But there is a separate parent account and a separate student account.
So the GPA shown on Naviance, is that at the end of the junior year? And also, are all the schools' acceptance results reflected there? Because is there anything missing? I mean, how accurate the data is?
Yeah, so the
Okay, so in terms of the GPA that is reflected on Naviance, so your student is using their end of junior year GPA when they are applying, but the GPAs on Naviance are going to also be that end of junior year GPA. The other thing to be aware of, though, is that when you're looking at a Naviance graph, the test scores that you're seeing on a Naviance graph, you have no idea whether that student submitted their test scores to the school. Even if the school is not test optional, you're not ever sure whether the data point that you're looking at on an SAT graph is the same data point as what you're looking at on an ACT graph. So in other words, like, you might be looking at an SAT score of, for example, a 1200, but that student might have submitted an ACT of a 33. So what you really want to pay more attention to on a Naviance graph is really more of the GPA information, and then when students are meeting with their counselor during their junior conference and then also during their senior meeting, we can clarify more with them, more information that they need to understand in order to see how they compare to students who have applied previously. Ms. Wu mentioned a couple minutes ago, there's something called a common data set. A common data set will actually provide more in-depth information for you about standardized testing scores for the previous class for that particular school. So it will tell you their middle 50th percentile and their 25th percentile and their 75th percentile for standardized testing data. So Naviance is a fantastic tool, and I don't mean to take away from how helpful it can be, particularly because you can search amongst different types of data points, right? So you can get kids that are looking at schools within a particular geographic region, particular majors, et cetera. But when you look and you dive down into the graphs, it really does require you to compare more information in order to really understand how to use that for your particular student.
Do you have specific resources for students who are considering schools mostly outside of the U.S.?
So, like, what do you mean by specific resources? Like UCAS schools?
So, like, Naviance was focused on schools within the U.S., and there were some in Canada, but for students who are considering schools, like, in Europe, are there other resources that would be comparable to something like Naviance?
Yeah, no, Naviance is only going to show where students from Ridge have applied. So if we don't have students who've applied there, we won't have that data. Then we would be relying more on what the institutional data would be, and then, the specifics of, what those colleges would be looking for. But Naviance is only specific to the school and what the students report.
Hi there. Great session so far. Thank you so much. Quick question on the GPA, because to your point, right, it's a pretty critical data point to be used. Is it the simple GPA that considered, or is it always the weighted GPA that should be considered across the board?
So the GPA that gets reported on the transcript is weighted. That is what we report out as a school. There's an opportunity for students to recalculate their GPA. The formulas in the program of studies, I actually think it's page 11. It's page 11. So they can do that themselves. The GPA that we report out from the transcript, what the school then does with that is kind of their prerogative, and it depends on each school. But the GPA you see on your child's transcript is weighted.
Hi. Regarding the acceptance rates of the college, is this only specific for the college, or does it change based on the course? For example, if you're going for a STEM, the acceptance rate is this. If you're going, for example, for psychology, it's a different acceptance rate.
That's a really good question. Acceptance rates do vary within a university amongst the different colleges, for example. So, what you will often find when you go and visit colleges is they will admit that their data depends on the majors sometimes. Some schools do not accept by major. So there are schools that are more liberal arts in nature that actually you don't even declare a major until the end of your sophomore year. So it is really important to understand the specific schools that your child's interested in and for them to have a really good understanding of how their major may or may not impact the acceptance rates. I will often share with people that my older daughter is a nursing major, and the acceptance rates for nursing majors are markedly different than they are for other majors within a particular university. And that is really important for your student to understand, because if they go to Naviance and they look at the sort of general data points that we are showing them on those graphs, you are seeing every student who has applied to those schools who has released their data. We do have some students who do ask for us to hold back their data, but any student who has agreed to have their data included, you're gonna see all of those data points, but you don't necessarily know for those students what those majors were. So you do wanna kind of do a little bit deeper of a dive if your student is applying to a particular sort of niche major. The more competitive majors tend to be things like pharmacy, for example. Like if you go to a Rutgers visit, they will happily tell you that the School of Pharmacy is their hardest, most competitive school. But again, School of Pharmacy, School of Nursing, typically engineering programs, sometimes they're business schools, but then sometimes you have schools like Syracuse, where their School of Communications is actually one of their hardest schools to get into. So it is really important for you to know, based on the school, whether or not they say to you, actually, these are the most competitive majors here at this particular institution. So those are great questions for your student to ask when they are on a visit. If they can't visit, emailing the admissions counselor to get a little bit more information about that type of data.
Hi, I had two questions. So is it preferred to have letters of recommendation come in only from your senior year teachers? And second, is Naviance the tool that would also aid in collating or coming up with the actual college application, and is it integrated with the college app itself?
So for the first question, the colleges prefer junior year academic core class teachers. So math, science, social studies, English, world language, that's what's preferred. If the college requires 2 letters, that's what's going to be preferred from those areas. If they require 1 letter and they'll accept a second letter, then there could be some flexibility whether or not it'd be better serving the student to have an elective if the elective is in the intended major. Ideally, you always want to ask, can you get a letter from a core teacher in an area that's related to your intended major? That's the priority. If for some reason the student feels that's not possible, then you'd consider the other junior year teachers. But colleges really don't want to hear from freshman, sophomore year teachers. In terms of senior year teachers, it's not that it's not possible to ask a senior teacher, but with the majority of students applying by November 1st, the senior year teachers will only have known the students for a month, and the majority would say that we don't know them well enough to write that. It could be a case where the students are having a teacher for a second time. So maybe they're taking an advanced course senior year, but they had that teacher freshman, sophomore year. And so when they saw that on their schedule, they decided to change. But we usually have our kids asking for letters before those schedules are released in August. So that's really the priority, is junior year. And we told that to the students today with the understanding that you've got plenty of time to develop those relationships and have that considered. So that would be the recommendation across the board. And then your second question was about the applications connecting to Naviance. Is that correct? Yeah. So Naviance is how the counseling department sends transcripts, counselor letters of recommendation, as well as the teachers submit their letters of recommendation through Naviance, and then it links into the Common App, and the Common App is how the student applies. So when the student opens up their common application, the application becomes available to students in late spring of junior year, and then it officially rolls over on August 1st, right before senior year. In the fall, September, we'll have a meeting with the senior parents, and we'll walk the seniors and then you guys as parents through those steps. I believe it was said earlier tonight, you can always look to see what we told the students this year. We do update that presentation every year. But the students have to do several steps inside of Naviance and the Common App for it to link. And then once it's linked, then everything we send in Naviance just automatically goes. And it's not necessary to all arrive at the same time, because it's not possible. But again, we discussed that in the senior mechanics.
Yes, just a quick question. Given that so many colleges are currently test optional and are becoming more and more test optional, do you believe that GPA is the primary factor, or should the main focus or best mode of operandum be to take standardized tests and have both factors be weighed equally? Is there a difference in the way colleges are looking at it nowadays?
So actually, since the pandemic, colleges are now adding back test scores. So before the pandemic, 1,000 colleges were test optional. Because of the pandemic, every college was test optional, and then slowly that number has been creeping back. I don't think it's ever going to be back to what it was when it's only 1,000 colleges, but more colleges, and certainly more selective colleges, are now requiring test scores. And I just think we're going to continue to see that trend as the colleges have completed their longitudinal studies with the data from the last 5 years. With that being said, nothing is ever more important than the transcript. So the colleges want to see what courses has a student taken in the context of what does Ridge High School offer. And Ridge High School offers everything, right? We offer everything at every level. So it's part of what makes this high school so well regarded, not just in the community, but also in the state and with colleges, is that they know our students are prepared. Our college prep courses are more challenging than other high schools. Our honors classes are more challenging, and then our AP students perform. You can see the test results on the profile. So the teaching is at a very, very high level. And the colleges know that. So they know that what a Ridge High School course and grade means translates into success on their campus. So you can't apply to any college without your transcript. So nothing is ever more important than your grades for the student. So if they're trying to decide how to spend their time, that would be more important. But certainly test scores are coming back, and then colleges are also, there's just so much going on in the news that does affect admissions. So like in terms of like current events with administration's position on diversity, colleges are being told that they have to be more accountable for their admissions classes, which is going to go back to statistics and data. So they're going to be asking for more numbers, which is why we also think we're going to see more colleges requiring test scores. But the grades are important, the courses you take in the context of what's offered, what you earn, and then how the student trends from year to year. The colleges are looking at all of that.
Hello. So I have actually two questions related to Naviance and recommendation letters. Students normally change in the last minute college list, right? They drop some colleges and add some colleges. So will that be considered be okay? Till what point they can change the colleges? That is one. Second, the limit in the college application, the Common App is 20 colleges. Sometimes they want to add more, but last time, my daughter was graduated, so she was telling, no, I can't apply more than 20. Okay, she didn't apply all 20, but at one point she wants to apply more, but she shortlisted 20. So what is your recommendation there?
Okay, now I feel like I remember your second question, and I'm trying to remember your first. I'm
Yeah.
going to go out of order and answer the second one first, and I might have to have you repeat the first one. This is what happens when you get old. Okay, so for your second question, in terms of how many schools can a student apply to, one of the questions that I would ask a student is, how many schools can you apply to well? Do you know what I mean? Like, you want to do it and put your best foot forward. So if you're talking about applying to schools, many of which could have supplemental questions, you got to be careful how many applications you decide to tackle, because you don't want to stretch so thin in terms of your ability to do it well. You are correct that only 20 schools can be applied to on the Common Application. That has not changed. Listen, I would suggest that there might be a reason for that, right? Like, maybe we sort of need to think about the idea that more than 20 schools might be extremely difficult for a student to manage the application process for. We have had students apply to more than that. They often have to get creative. They have to use college-specific applications, which we mentioned earlier. There is also another application that does allow students to apply to more than one school, called the Coalition app. It looked like that was going to be more of a movement than it really has become. Not that many students are really using the Coalition app. It's a little bit more tedious to use in certain ways, and the interface with Naviance is not quite the same. So there are reasons to use the Common App over the Coalition app if you can, but that is another way that students have been able to add more schools to their list. Again, I would really caution students to consider, do you really need more than 20 schools in order to have a well-balanced list? The Jello at the wall theory is not necessarily the way that you want to go through the application process. Like, well, if I apply to enough schools, you don't add the acceptance rates together, right? Like, you're not going to get a higher rate of acceptance simply because you've applied to 35 instead of 20. So they're still going to have their own individual acceptance rates. Help me, what was your first question?
The question was, the students change the college list.
Yes, now I remember. Okay. So yes, changing the college list. It is fine for them to change the college list. It is actually fine for them to make game time decisions about, do I really want to apply to the school or not, and do I want to add more schools or not? What they have to make sure they are doing is following the process that we have instructed them on. We have a 10-step process for seniors. It's going to be very important that they follow that process when they're adding schools to their list. If they decide not to apply places, that's fine, unless they decide not to apply to all of their safety schools, in which case we have a problem. So there are certain reasons why it's important to talk to your counselor if you're making a lot of changes to your list, so that we make sure that the list remains balanced, we make sure that they're following the correct process to add those schools, add teacher letters of recommendation, make sure that their transcripts are being sent. But we are very flexible about the idea that students can add and change their lists really up until the deadlines.
Quick question here. In the past, is it common for some students not to report all the schools? So the acceptance and rejection, did it come to Ridge High School, or it comes to the student themselves?
Yeah. So at the end of the school year, when students have applied to all their schools, they've heard back, at least they've heard back from most schools. We will have them come in again for a quick, I think we call it senior check-in or Naviance check-in, and we actually open up Naviance on the computer and we go through each school with them in their Naviance list. And we will mark it as accepted, what Ms. Wu showed in the scattergrams, accepted, denied, waitlisted, deferred. So we capture all of that data, and then some magic happens over the summer, and then it goes back into the scattergrams for the next year's graduating class. So for this year's seniors, we'll do the process with them at the end of the year to get ready for the junior class coming up as seniors next year.
More of a tactical question. So when they have this meeting in March, they're going to put together an initial list of colleges, and when they do the spring break visits, and eventually what they will decide probably will look very different, the final list, right, than what they had in March. So how do they manage this list, and how do they keep track of which ones to delete, which ones to not go, which ones to add? Does Naviance provide that option, or do they do it offline, or do you provide some templates?
So students can add and delete colleges from their list as long as they haven't requested transcripts that have already been sent. They should be keeping an updated list in their Common App, and that's where they're actually applying. Parents can add colleges, but parents cannot delete colleges. So you can add to your heart's desire, and they'll see what you've added, but you can't delete anything. So the students will be able to add, counselors can add, so you can kind of see the history after the meeting. What did the counselor add, and you can see exactly in the time, or the date I should say. And then, some students might go on visits for spring break, and they might come back in to see us, in May or June, and say, hey, I did some visits, or I got new test scores. I'd like a check-in just to go over my list. Things have changed, so that does happen as well. They're welcome to come back in after they've had their one-on-one meeting. And then again, we meet with them in the fall. So when we meet with them in September, we go over another packet, right, Part B, where they've indicated the finalists, and then we look at Naviance, and then that's another chance for us to make sure it lines up. So we all go through every school that's on that list, and then if something has been sent out, then we can delete it for them from their list. And then once they've requested it and it's gone out, then they may say, I decided not to apply. And then, as Ms. McGivney said, we have that other meeting where they never applied, so then we remove it so it doesn't, stay in there. So there's lots of different checkpoints. But counselors, at some point, it's only the counselor that can delete it, and we'll catch it, eventually. But the students will have full control over it.
Thank you. I had a question. I heard this, but I wasn't sure if it is really true or just a rumor. So you said that early decision is a binding agreement. I've heard my daughter and her friends talk about certain colleges where even if they apply, they'd be blacklisted because somebody in the previous years didn't abide by that binding agreement. So that college will blacklist Ridge School for the next couple of years. Is that true, or is that just...
I would have answered this question differently before this year. So, there was a very controversial article and situation that came out of Tulane not long ago where they maybe I should say allegedly, they allegedly blacklisted a school after a student did not attend that school after they were accepted early decision. So, I will tell you that. However, what I will also tell you is I do think the rumor mill is real strong when it comes to the idea of being blacklisted. We are not aware of that ever happening at Ridge High School. We have had rumors about particular schools. Students come to us and say, I heard we are blacklisted. Northwestern's a big one. I don't know why people say that. I had a kid go to Northwestern while they were telling us that. So I was like, I don't think that's true. How do you know? Well, because I have a kid that's there. So no, that really doesn't happen all that frequently. Can I say that that will never happen or has never happened? I would say after this year, I cannot say that. But I would say that early decision is an important decision. To apply early decision is supposed to be a binding agreement where you have discussed with your student, is this an affordable option for us regardless of what the financial aid package would be? Banning any change of circumstance, right? If someone loses their job, they're ill, et cetera, they do understand that life does happen. But this is supposed to be that a student 100% wants to attend that school and that it is their top choice school and that it fits them for all of the reasons. It's appropriate in terms of distance, it's appropriate in terms of cost. So we do really speak with students pretty firmly about the idea that early decision is an important decision and needs to be made in conjunction with parent, student, counselor, and we're all signing off on it. The student signs the agreement, the parent signs the agreement, and the counselor signs the agreement. So it is an important decision to be made. Again, I don't want to say that that would never happen, but I would say that that is not something that we are aware of ever happening at Ridge High School, and we have data to prove the contrary when a kid comes and tells us, the latest rumor. I would say that a lot of times it's really important for you to challenge the things that you are hearing from your students. We hear, there's a doozy, every year there's one where I'm like, that is a new one, I have never heard that one before. Last year, one of the good ones was that psychology was going to stop being a social studies class and become a science class, everywhere. And we were like, okay, that's no, it's not. It's actually not a science class. It's a social studies class, and the College Board has also dictated that it's a social studies class. But you just hear these rumors, and the kids are 100% convinced, and they come in and they actually argue with you as if you might be wrong. So it's really important to challenge some of the things that you're hearing at home and suggest that they come and talk to us about things that they believe to be true.
Are you aware whether any of the universities use AI proficiency as an entry criteria? I imagine they will at some point, but I wonder whether you're aware of any at this point.
So you're asking if they are scanning documents with AI or using AI to make their decisions?
Whether the children should be proficient in using AI as an admission criteria to the school.
Oh. No, at the moment, using AI or proficiency in using AI is not a criteria for admission. There is a lot of discussion amongst the counselor population, both high school and college, about whether colleges will begin to use AI screeners in terms of are they looking for essays written by AI, and then other questions that have come up about are colleges using AI to make decisions about applicants? And there are schools that have admitted that they are using AI to make decisions about applicants.
I know you can send out unlimited applications, right? I mean, you could go balls to the walls if you wanted to. My question is, do you have a suggestion on like how many safety schools is like a good number of safety schools to have? Yeah, I know you could do a million, target. Should you be doing a reach school, or is it okay just to do safety and target? Those types of questions, because you could go crazy and apply to schools you're not going to get into. But how many safety is like a good safety? Because I hear all the time that there's no such thing as like a safety school anymore. So I just want to make sure we're covering our bases when we're looking at schools.
Yeah, I think prior to the pandemic, we would have said 5 to 7, 7 to 10 colleges total, with 1 or 2 safeties, 1 or 2 targets, and then 3 or 4 targets, and then 1 or 2 reaches. Typically, students, if they're driving up a number, it's going to be reaches. Reaches are deeply personal, so if a student wants to apply to a reach, I'm not going to tell a student not to, because if you don't apply, you won't get in, right? So that much we know. But they have to, make that decision within what they think is reasonable with their parents. What we really focus on are the targets and safeties. Since the pandemic, because of test optional, because of the rise in applications across the board, we've all bumped that number up. We probably now see more like 10 to 15 total schools. And so we're looking for 3 to 4 safeties, right? 4 to 6 targets. And then again, the other number is how many reach schools you choose. So I would say that every student is different because the profile of a student is different and their goals are. So depending on where a student sits academically, it can make it difficult to find safeties. And it might not be the student you're thinking, right? It sometimes is harder for a student who's high achieving to really find a pure safety. Sometimes a pure safety for a student may be one school. And if you look at the data, and this is where Naviance is great, it's like if Ridge High School has all green, right, so which we do at many schools, going back to what I said earlier, I do feel like there are solid safeties, but we're even seeing, again, just changes in the landscapes of, colleges changing decisions, like my colleague said earlier, about what you apply into. So like Indiana Kelley used to be automatic admit, right? If you met a certain GPA and test score, you were automatically into the business school. It's a top 10 business school. Well, they took that away, so now you can get into Indiana, but you might not get into the business school. So there's a safety that's gone, because now they're going to do it using what appears to be like a 4-page multiple choice profiler, which we have no idea how they're going to use it. I don't know if they know how they're going to use it either. So we just have no sense of how they're going to shape that class. So I think it does vary that way, but there definitely are safeties. I think our school has a great relationship with colleges, and by that I mean when you look at the data. And so that's really where the counselors weigh in, I think, the most heavily is targets and safeties, having a balanced list, and then if students want to talk strategy towards the top of the list, then we'll engage in that too.
So is there any difference on Naviance when parents log in and when students log in?
So there is no difference. The information that you can see or that is accessible to you and your student is the same when you log in versus when they log in. What gets a little bit different is like the functions, I guess, that you have access to later on, and that will really come into play when they're seniors. So for example, in the parent account, you can't actually like move colleges into the colleges I'm applying to section and kind of move through with the transcript process, but in terms of the information that we showed, you have just as much access as your student. You can see the same information.
All right. Well, thank you again for joining us, and I will ask you to join me in giving a round of applause to our school counselors tonight. You guys are an amazing crew. Thank you for all that you do, and thank you to all of you for coming. We will get this information to you. We'll make sure that it's posted on our website as well, and have a good night.